Hi there, let's crochet coal. First, grab your set and remove the lid. I'll actually use it to store the items I won't need. Here you've got the care instructions along with the yarn. Set the smaller yarn skins aside for the moment. You'll need the hook and the light gray yarn. In this little bag, you'll also find the stitch markers. You'll need those too. Set the stuffing aside. Now take the yarn and remove the label. Locate the yarn tail and place the yarn ball inside the tin. This way the yarn will stay clean and unravel smoothly. This will also help you control the tension in the yarn. Okay, let's begin with the magic ring. Take the yarn holding the yarn tail in your right hand and the working yarn in your left hand. Now let's start with the base of the ring. Place the working yarn over the tail and pinch where they intersect. Now pull the working yarn out of the loop that we've just created. Give this new loop a twist to form a cross at the base. Then pull the working yarn through this loop, tightening it until the knot is snug but not too tight. Now test the magic. Pull on the yarn tail, and if your ring tightens up, you've got it right. Adjust the ring to make sure it's not too big, and then put the yarn tail back inside the ring so that these two strands remain together. Now tighten the loop for the hook. Grab the hook and slide it into the loop. To adjust the loop to fit the size of the hook, simply pull on the working yarn. The loop should be just the size of the tip of the hook so that it is easy to slide the hook through. Turn your hand palm up. Hold the yarn on your pinky and ring fingers. Guide the yarn behind and over the middle finger and the pointer. Secure the magic ring with your middle finger and your thumb. Make sure you've got tension in the working yarn and the magic ring. In row 1, make 6 single stitches. Put the hook through the ring and grab the working yarn. Pull the hook back through the ring, forming a loop similar in size to the first one. Yarn over again and twist the hook downwards to catch the yarn. Pull it through both loops on the hook. Your first single stitch is done. Check the size of the loop on the hook and continue creating 5 more single stitches. Put the hook through the ring and grab the working yarn. Form another loop on the hook, yarn over, and pull through both loops on the hook. Create 4 more single stitches into the ring. Once you're done with all 6 stitches, pull on the hook to make a larger loop. This will save our last stitch from falling apart. Here you can see we've got our 6 stitches all lined up. Each stitch has the shape of a V. Now let's tighten the magic ring. Get the yarn tail out and pull on it to tighten the ring. Make sure not to over-tighten the ring so it is easier to crochet row 2. To count the stitches, gently pinch each stitch to make it easier to see. This is stitch number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now let's find the second stitch. Again, this is the first one and the second one. Grab a stitch marker and slide it under the V of the second stitch. This is going to help us in the next round. Here's the first stitch and the second one. Grab another stitch marker and put it into the next V, into the third stitch. Here is our row 1 with 6 single stitches. In round 2, we're going to have to make 6 increases. An increase is typically 2 single stitches made in the same stitch of the previous round. Increases are used to shape our project, and in our case, we need to start widening our circle to shape the head. Let's take a closer look at the rows formulas. In crochet, a C means single crochet stitch. In row 1, you make 6 single stitches. In row 2, INC means increase. You make 6 increases, and each increase is 2 stitches. So 6 times 2 equals 12 stitches for row 2. The number in the brackets tells you how many stitches you'll have by the end of the row. The formulas in row 1 and row 2 are relatively simple. However, more complex formulas exist. For example, let's examine row 3. The formula for row 3 reveals numbers within square brackets multiplied by another number, and the final number in brackets indicates the stitches you should have at the end of the row. What's inside the brackets represents a sequence, which in this case is a single stitch followed by an increase. This sequence is then multiplied by 6, meaning you repeat it 6 times to complete the row. And as a result, you will get 18 stitches in that row. Now let's start the second row. Put the hook in the loop and tighten it. Get your yarn in working position. Check the size of the loop on the hook. In row 2, we need to make 6 increases. Put your hook under the first stitch, the one that's before the marked one, and make sure you have 3 loops on the hook. Grab the working yarn from underneath and pull it through the stitch. Then yarn over again and finish off the stitch by pulling the working yarn through both loops on the hook. Now we need to mark the beginning of the second row with the stitch marker. Make sure to keep marking the first stitch of every row. To complete our first increase, put another stitch into the same hole where you put the first one. Grab the working yarn and pull it out of that stitch, then yarn over again and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. Now the first increase is done. Remove the stitch marker from the second stitch and work 2 single stitches or an increase into the second stitch of the round. Once you're done with the second increase, work an increase into the next stitch, the one with the marker, which is the third stitch of the round. Now we've made 3 of the 6 increases and still have 3 more to do. Once you've finished row 2, pull on the hook to form a large loop and remove the hook. Count the stitches starting with the stitch marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now it's the perfect time to tighten the magic ring. Pull on the working yarn to get rid of the hole in the middle of the ring. In row 3, you will need to follow a simple pattern of a single stitch followed by an increase. Remove the stitch marker and insert the hook right under the same stitch where the stitch marker was, and complete the first single stitch. Make sure you always mark the very first stitch of every round. Then proceed to the next stitch. Crochet 2 single stitches into the next stitch to form an increase. Now repeat the pattern of a single stitch followed by an increase 5 more times. By the end of the row, you should have 18 stitches. You can identify the right side of your crochet project by the presence of only vertical bars. The wrong side will feature both vertical and horizontal bars, forming a distinct texture. When counting stitches on the right side of your project, begin by allocating the magic ring and the first row. Next, you'll notice that the second row starts with a bump. Directly under this bump, you will find the first stitch of the second round. Similar to the hole under this V, but is the first stitch of the second round where we place the increase. You'll find the 2 post trays back into this hole. As you follow along the round, you'll encounter 5 more instances where 2 posts trace back into the same hole, indicating the 6 increases. The first stitch of the third round is a single stitch, so there's just 1 post tracing back into that hole. In the second stitch, you'll find 2 posts tracing back into the hole. This is an increase. Then again, a single stitch and an increase. A single stitch and an increase. By examining the right side of your project, you can accurately count the stitches. This method is essential for identifying any errors. In row 4, we are going to follow a pattern of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Once you remove the stitch marker, place the first single stitch into the first stitch of the previous row. Place the stitch marker in the first stitch to mark off the beginning of the round, and continue by creating another single stitch in the next stitch. Now make an increase into the third stitch of the previous row. Continue making 2 single stitches followed by an increase till the end of the round. Once you're done, you should have 24 stitches in round 4. Before moving on to row 5, count the stitches to make sure you have 24. If you discover that you have too few or too many stitches in a row, first identify the mistake by counting the posts. Then pinch the last correct stitch that has to stay and carefully unravel all the stitches beyond it. Next, reinsert the hook into the small loop just above the stitch that you've saved and proceed to complete the round correctly. In row 5, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat the sequence 6 times. By the end of the row, you should have 30 stitches. Count the stitches before moving on to the next row. In row 6, crochet 30 single stitches. In row 7, follow a pattern of 4 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat the pattern 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 36 stitches. Once you're done with the last increase, remove the hook and count the stitches. You should have 36. In row 8, crochet 36 single stitches. In row 9, the pattern to follow involves 4 single stitches followed by a decrease. A decrease is essentially the reverse of an increase, where 2 stitches are combined into one. Start by making the first single crochet into the first stitch of the previous round. Make 3 more single stitches in a row and begin to decrease. Insert your hook through the next stitch, catching only the front bar. Do the same with the stitch that follows. This will leave you with 3 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pull the hook through the first 2 loops. Finally, yarn over again and pull the hook through the last 2 loops to complete the decrease. Then find the next full stitch and start making the next 4 single stitches. Repeat the pattern of 4 single stitches followed by a decrease 5 more times, and at the end of the row you should have 30 stitches. Make sure to count the stitches, and in this round you should have exactly 30. In row 10, crochet 30 single stitches. In row 11, follow a pattern of 3 single stitches followed by a decrease. By the end of the row, you should have 24 stitches. Count the stitches before moving on to the next row. You should have 24. In row 12, crochet 12 decreases. By the end of the row, you should have 12 stitches. Once you're done crocheting row 12, make sure to count the stitches. You should have exactly 12. Before we move on to row 13, we're going to put in the eyes. The eyes come with the silver pad that makes them shine, as well as the backing that you use to lock the eye in place. Once you put on that backing, it's going to be hard to take it off. Before we start putting the eyes in, let's figure out where to put them. Make sure that the bump of the second row is turned to the side, beginning by counting the rows from the center of the head down. Identify the 6th and the 7th rows. The eyes will be placed between these rows. Select a hole in this area and insert your hook to widen it. Then grab a stitch marker and put it as a placeholder for the first eye. Double check to make sure that you've got the stitch marker exactly between rows 6 and 7. To position the second eye, count 5 holes from the first eye to the side. Then insert your hook into the 6th hole. This will be the spot for the second eye. Widen the hole a little bit with your hook and put a stitch marker as a placeholder to mark the position of the second eye. Make sure that the stitch markers are positioned exactly between the rows 6 and 7, 6 stitches apart. Now let's replace the first stitch marker with an actual eye. Use the stitch marker to widen the hole a little bit so that the eye goes through. Keep your thumb next to the hole that you've chosen and insert the first eye. Place the backing on the stem of the eye and press with your thumbs to click it shut. Now replace the second stitch marker with the second eye. Once you're done, there should be 3 stitches between the eyes. Now it is the perfect timing to start stuffing our toy. Get some of the stuffing and make sure it's nice and even. Spread it out with your fingers where necessary. Only half fill the head with the stuffing to avoid it getting in the way during the next rounds of crocheting. Gradually, we will add more stuffing as we go. Make sure to put the stuffing in neatly so that none of it is sticking out. Now squish the head and check. If it is still too soft, you can add a little more stuffing to it. Once you're done stuffing the head, move on to the next row. In row 13, follow a pattern of a single stitch followed by an increase. Repeat this pattern 6 times. This should leave you with 18 stitches in the round. In row 14, crochet 18 single stitches. In row 15, follow a sequence of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the row, you should have 24 stitches. Once you're done, make sure to count the stitches. You should have 24. In row 16, crochet 24 single stitches. In row 17, crochet 6 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this pattern 3 times. By the end of the round, you should have 21 stitches. Make sure to count the stitches before you move on. In row 18, crochet 21 single stitches. In row 19, follow a pattern of 5 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat the pattern 3 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. You are very close to completing the body, so now is the best time to fully stuff it. Add the stuffing in small pieces, distributing it evenly between the head and the body. Remember not to overfill the toy so it remains nice and squishy. It's best to fill up the head first and only then continue filling up the body. Once you're done filling up the body, make sure that none of the stuffing is sticking out and move on to the next row. In row 20, follow a pattern of a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat the pattern 6 times. You should have 12 stitches left by the end of the row. In row 21, crochet 6 decreases. Cut off the working yarn, leaving a 6 to 8 inch tail. Then pull the yarn tail through the last stitch completely. Now let's fasten off the body. Grab the tapestry needle and thread it with the yarn tail from the body. Start by inserting the needle into the stitch where the stitch marker was, from the inside to the outside. Ensure that you're catching only the front bar of the stitch. Then pass the needle through every stitch in the same manner. After threading through all stitches, pull the yarn tail to tighten the center. Then insert the needle into the stitch right beneath the yarn tail, guiding it out anywhere on the body. To create a fixing stitch, insert the needle into a stitch directly above or below where it came out of. This way you will not form any horizontal bars on the plushie and your fixing stitch will remain invisible. Pass the needle through the entire body. Leave the yarn tail as it is for now. If it's too long, you can trim it so it doesn't get in the way. Start making the leg with a magic ring. Then put 6 single stitches into the ring for row 1. Once you're done with row 1, tighten the magic ring. Remember not to over-tighten the ring to make it easier to crochet. In row 2, crochet 6 increases. At the end of the row, you should have 12 stitches. Keep marking the beginning of each round with a stitch marker. Once you've completed row 2, count the stitches to make sure you've got exactly 12. In row 3, crochet 12 single stitches. In row 4, follow a pattern of a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat the pattern 4 times. By the end of the row, you should have 8 stitches. Count the stitches to make sure you've got exactly 8, and hide the yarn tail inside the leg. In row 5, crochet 8 single stitches. Now we are ready to complete the leg. remove the stitch marker and add some stuffing inside the leg. Fold your work in half, aligning 3 pairs of stitches. To complete the leg, we will crochet through both of those sides. Insert your hook into the first pair of stitches, ensuring that you have 5 loops on the hook. Yarn over and complete the first stitch. Then insert your hook into the second pair of stitches and complete another stitch. Do the same with the third pair of stitches. Once you're done, remove the hook and cut off the working yarn, leaving an 8 to 12 inch yarn tail. Pull the working yarn through the last stitch and the leg is done. Repeat these steps to make the second leg. Start making the arm with the magic ring. Then put 4 single stitches into the magic ring for row 1. Once you've put 4 single stitches into the ring, tighten the ring, but not all the way. This ensures that we can still see the first stitch of the round when we continue with round 2. In row 2, crochet 4 increases. This should leave you with 8 stitches in the round. In rows 3 through 5, crochet 8 single stitches each. In row 6, follow a pattern of 2 single stitches followed by a decrease. By the end of the row, you should have 6 stitches. Finish off the arm in the same way as you finished off the leg. Fold your work in half and match up 2 pairs of stitches. Put your hook through the first pair of stitches and create a single stitch. Then do the same with the other pair of stitches. Once you're done, remove the hook and cut off the working yarn, leaving an 8-inch yarn tail. Pull the yarn tail through the last stitch completely and repeat this process to make the second arm. To make the ear, start with a magic ring. In row 1, put 6 single stitches into the magic ring. In row 2, crochet 6 increases. You should have 12 stitches by the end of the round. Count the stitches before moving on to the next round. In row 3, follow a pattern of a single stitch followed by an increase. This should bring the stitch count to 18. Count the stitches to ensure that you have exactly 18. Cut off the working yarn, leaving about 15 inches for the yarn tail. Pull the yarn tail completely through the stitch. Complete this piece with an invisible fasten off. To do that, thread the tapestry needle with the yarn tail. Then skip one stitch and insert your needle into the next stitch. Then put the needle through the stitch where the yarn tail came out of. Ensure to put the needle through the middle of the stitch, so between the two bars of the V, guiding the needle out on the wrong side of your project. Then secure the yarn tail by putting the needle under the horizontal bar on the wrong side. Now you have completed the invisible fasten off. This technique allows to achieve a clean and smooth finish. Repeat these steps to create 3 more parts. In total, you should have 2 light gray parts and 2 white parts. Start making the muzzle with a magic ring. Put 4 single stitches into the magic ring for row 1. In row 2, follow a pattern of an increase followed by a single stitch. Repeat this pattern twice. By the end of the row, you should have 6 stitches. Cut the working yarn, leaving about 15 inches for the yarn tail. Remove the stitch marker and thread the yarn tail through the needle. Complete the muzzle with an invisible fasten off. Once you're done with row 2, make sure to tighten the magic ring. Start the tail by making the magic ring. Put 6 single stitches into the magic ring for row 1. In row 2, make 6 single stitches. Remove the stitch marker and shape the tail with your fingers. Complete the tail with an invisible fasten off. Start making the belly with a magic ring. Put 6 single stitches into the ring for row 1. In row 2, crochet 6 increases. This should leave you with 12 stitches in row 2. Cut off the working yarn, leaving a yarn tail that would be as long as 3 circumferences of the round. This length is sufficient to sew the belly onto the body. Complete the belly with an invisible fasten off. Now let's sew both parts of the ear together. Thread the needle with the light gray yarn tail. Make sure the wrong side is left inside between the two ear parts. Get the yarn tail from the magic ring and hide it between the two parts of the ear. Match up the two parts. Ensure that the wrong sides are inside between the two parts. Rearrange the yarn tails if necessary. Grab the needle and guide it through the stitch on the white part that's adjacent to the yarn tail. Insert the needle from top to bottom. Then guide the needle through the next stitch on the white part from bottom to top and through the adjacent stitch on the gray part. This time guiding the needle only under the front loop of the stitch. The front loop of the stitch is the one closest to you. Then insert the needle into the next stitch on the gray part using only the front loop and guide it through the adjacent stitch on the white part. Follow along sewing the two parts together. Ensure to use the full stitch on the white part and only the front loop of the stitches on the gray part. Cut off all the excess yarn tails, trapping them inside the ear. Once you've sewn both parts together, guide the needle out on the rim of the ear between the white and the gray parts. Let's attach the belly to our plushie. Thread the yarn tail from the magic ring through the needle. Find the belly's center point on the toy. Insert the needle into the belly's center point and guide it out in the middle of the back. Check that the belly is positioned correctly. Then thread the needle with the longer yarn tail. Insert the needle into the stitch directly beneath the yarn tail and guide it out of the next stitch on the body along the rim of the belly. Then insert the needle through the next stitch on the belly from bottom to top. After that, guide the needle through the next stitch on the belly's rim from top to bottom and into the body. Exit through the next stitch on the body. Guide the needle through the next stitch on the belly from bottom to top. Continue stitching along the belly's rim. Once you are done stitching the belly onto the body, guide the needle out at the back of the body to hide the belly's yarn tails. Once you're happy with the positioning of the belly, it's time to hide the yarn tails. The goal is to have pairs of yarn tails exit from the same stitches. Because the color of the yarn tails and the body differs, we need to rethread one of the yarn tails into the stitch where the other one is. Insert the needle at the current exit point of the yarn tail that you want to reposition, and guide the needle out from the stitch where the other yarn tail is. Tie the yarn tails twice. Cut off the excess yarn. And push the knot into the body using the needle. To hide a lonely yarn tail, it is usually enough to create a fixing stitch. To do that, guide the needle into a stitch directly below or above the current exit point of the yarn tail. Guide the needle out of any stitch on the body. Then cut off the excess yarn. Pinch your toy gently for the yarn tail to hide entirely in the body. Grab the legs and prepare one of the legs by threading its yarn tail through the needle. Take the first leg and fit it on the bottom of the body. Match the seam of the leg with the center point on the bottom of the body. Once you're happy with how the leg fits, secure it with a stitch marker. Turn your plushie to face you to make sure that the leg is fitted correctly. Now fit the second leg in the same way. Make sure that the legs are symmetrical. You can turn your project upside down and use the first leg as a reference. Pin the second leg to the body. Once you're satisfied with the position of the legs, grab the yarn tail with the needle and insert the needle into the stitch that's directly beneath the yarn tail. Then guide it out of the body at the stitch beneath the last seam stitch of the leg. And remove the stitch marker. Guide the needle through the last stitch on the seam of the leg. Make sure to put the needle through the seam of the leg from bottom to top. Then insert the needle into the same stitch on the body that it came out of. Guide the needle out at the back of the body and leave the yarn tail at the back for now. We will finally secure the legs after fitting both of them. This way it's easier to adjust the positioning of the legs if necessary without undoing much work. Repeat these steps with the second leg using the first leg as a reference. Once you have fitted both of the legs, remove the stitch markers and turn your plushie to face you. Check that the legs are positioned correctly. After that, let's finish sewing the legs. Thread the yarn tail from the back through the needle. Then insert the needle into any stitch in the row above or below, guiding it through the body into the middle stitch of the leg seam. Avoid pulling on the yarn tail too much, as this can form dents on the body. If a dent did form, push the needle under it and gently nudge it upwards to restore the shape. Then put the needle back through the leg, this time exiting on the other side of the leg. To prevent the leg from flapping, insert the needle into a stitch in the row above on the body and guide it out through the entire body. Gently pull on the yarn tail to attach the leg closely to the body. Insert the needle into any adjacent stitch in the row above or below where the yarn tail is. Guide the needle out at any stitch on the body. Repeat the same steps for the second leg. Once you're happy with the positioning of the legs, it's time to hide the yarn tails. Let's go ahead and sew on the arms. Take one of the arms and thread its yarn tail through the needle. Position the first arm to your satisfaction and then place the second arm symmetrically. The arms are intended to go between rows 12 and 13. Once you're happy with the position of the arms, set aside the arm without the needle. Then take the needle to sew on the first arm. Next, insert the needle into the stitch right beneath the yarn tail and guide it out of the stitch that's directly under the last stitch of the arm seam. Then put the needle through the last stitch of the arm seam from bottom to top. Reinsert it into the same stitch that it came out of and bring it out somewhere on the body to create a fixing stitch. Once satisfied with the position of the arm, proceed to fit the second one. Repeat the sewing process for the second arm using the first one as a reference, aiming for symmetry with the first arm. Once you're done sewing on the arms, hide the yarn tails. Now let's attach the muzzle. Thread the yarn tail from the magic ring through the needle and find the center point for the muzzle. Guide the needle through the entire head, exiting at the back. Next, thread the longer yarn tail through the needle and start sewing on the muzzle. Sew on the muzzle using the exact same technique as we've used for the belly. Now let's attach the ears. The ears should go between rows 5 and 8 on the sides of the head. Place the ears to the head to find the position you prefer. Put your thumb close to the place where the ear should be sewn. Let go of the ear and insert the needle into the stitch between row 7 and 8, guiding the needle out from a stitch between row 5 and 6. And I am placing the ear 3 stitches away from the eye. Now insert your needle through the next stitch on the ear. Reinsert the needle into the stitch on the head that it came out of. Guide it out of a stitch in the next row. Then insert the needle through another stitch on the ear. And finally, put the needle through the same stitch on the head that it came out of and guide it out at the back of the head. Repeat the process for the second ear. Make sure that the ears are fitted symmetrically. Make sure you're happy with the positioning of the ears. Hide the yarn tails as usual. Finally, let's sew on the tail. Position the tail onto the body and try sitting your toy down to ensure it can sit properly once the tail is attached. The tail is crucial for the toy's ability to sit. Next, take the tapestry needle threaded with the yarn tail from the magic ring and guide it from the center point of the tail into the back of the toy. Leave the yarn tail at the back for now. Then use the longer yarn tail to sew the tail onto the toy. Sew the tail in the same manner as the belly and the muzzle. And finally, your plushie is complete. I hope you enjoyed the project. Please don't forget to take a picture of your toy and share it with us. Thank you, and bye for now.